Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. We have a lot to cover today. It's just you and me. We rescheduled an interview that we had with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano for next Friday because our schedules kind of clashed. So he will be on next Friday. We have a star-studded lineup next week. We'll get to that later on. A couple announcements, a big weekend for events in our area. I'll get to those later as well. Let's see. Let's put up a contact information to start off here. If you want to weigh in on the topics this morning, I would love to hear from you. I am going to talk a little bit about the dress code in the Senate, but just very quickly. It's not, I think, the biggest issue of the day, but I think it is part of a larger picture. So we'll talk about that. We've got quite a bit here about the migrant crisis. We'll also be talking about President Biden as well as the presidential race. A couple things here about New York, I think, as well. A lot of show prep this morning, so it's all blending together. All right, be a part of the program. Contact me at any time. I love to read your comments throughout the show. So let's start with Fetterman. So all week long, we talked about Chuck Schumer changing the rules in the Senate for the dress code and taking full advantage of it. And the reason, most likely anyway, I think everybody agrees that the rules changed is because of Senator John Fetterman out of Pennsylvania, Democrat. So he presides over the Senate 2 days ago, maybe yesterday. No, 2 days ago, wearing shorts, T-shirt or button-up shirt, I guess. Very, very, very casual. Yesterday, he met, and I'm going to put the photo up here. Yesterday, he met with Ukrainian President Zelensky in this exact outfit. Well, that's button-up at least, I guess. He dressed down for an official meeting with the Ukrainian president at the Capitol just days after the Senate dress code was altered for him. Now, you know about Zelensky traveling to Washington, meet a bipartisan group, talking about, more aid and whatnot. While every other member of Congress appeared in a suit and tie to meet Zelensky, Fetterman arrived in his usual casual attire, shorts, a short sleeve shirt, and tennis shoes. Now, he's been making a big deal out of it and getting some hay out of it as well, saying, the world didn't end the first time I started wearing this on the Senate floor. And then he said, if the Republicans can actually get the government not to shut down, because that's a big controversy too, which we may get to later on, McCarthy having some real trouble with that. If they can work together, then I'll wear a suit to save democracy or something like that. Very kind of cocky about this. Well, it's not Republicans necessarily that are criticizing him. They are, of course, but Democrats as well. Dick Durbin criticizing the recent dress code change. I guess I can take that off. You've seen that probably long enough. Saying that the upper chamber needs to act on this. Quote, I'm concerned about it. The senator in question from Pennsylvania is a personal friend, but I think we need to have standards. And many people, and there's a really good piece, I think it was by Liz Peek at Fox. Someone at Fox News wrote a piece about it, talking about just the degradation in general in society, the education system and how everything is getting more quote unquote lax and obviously not leading to good, not anything better. Durbin said, I can't understand exactly what he was thinking at that point, meaning Chuck Schumer changing the rules. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt until I speak to him, but I think the Senate needs to act on this. So, number 2 Senator, Dick Durbin, is not happy about the ending of the dress code. With the dress down change, senators can wear whatever they want while standing on the Senate floor. Of course, we heard Susan Collins joking that she's going to wear a bikini. At the helm of the hollowed chambers, where colleagues and Senate staffers wore snappy suits, Fetterman donned a baggy, dark-colored button-down T-shirt, knee-length shorts, and sneakers. And that was a good point that was made in that article that I mentioned earlier in the week, that the rules only change for the elites. So the senators can wear whatever they want, but the aides, the staffers, still have to wear dress attire. So it's different rules for different people. Again, this is not something that I want to continue to talk about necessarily, but I thought it was worth mentioning because it has been a big story all week, and it's going to continue to be a big story as Fetterman continues to show his disdain for the original rules and maybe some would say take advantage of the new rules. So enough about that. That's our first segment, getting that out of the way because we actually have some very important things to get to. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. We'll be right back. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. As I mentioned, there will not be an M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program this morning. It's just you and I. But two times ago when we had the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of the program, we were joined by Melissa Edwards, and Susan Walker from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Steuben County. And the reason I mentioned that is don't forget that Farm Trail Days is set for tomorrow. And it sounds like the perfect fall event. And there's a lot of great events in our area this weekend, which we're going to get to a few others as the show unfolds. But there's 11 different farms, I think, or somewhere between 9 and 11. You can find out more at putknowledgetowork.org. There's a passport program where you can visit our local farms and you get a passport with stickers and you're entered into a contest. So again, find out more at putknowledgetowork.org. All farms on the trail will open at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. There'll be educational activities, wagon rides, demonstrations, crafts, animals to pet, products to purchase, and so much more. So thank you again to Melissa Edwards and Susan Walker. You can find that link to that interview if you want to find out more about Farm Trail Days on our Facebook page. Okay. I find this interesting. They ended up changing the link, and I'm not sure the reason why, but I don't think you'll be surprised by this. We're going to talk about Joe Biden in just a moment and more in depth. But CNN had a poll, and it says Biden holds commanding lead in New Hampshire Democratic primary. Now, if you look at the coverage of former President Trump, who has had a commanding lead himself in the primary throughout the whole primary process, it never says commanding lead. You know, it's always, can Nikki Haley move up? Is DeSantis putting a hurt on? You know, you've seen all the coverage of it. Very little has been about how much the former president leads in the primary. But with Biden, who most people, if you ask them, if they're not knowledgeable like you are and aren't paying attention to current events, probably would not know that Biden even has a primary challenge. And it's interesting because the Wall Street Journal yesterday had a piece. We didn't have a chance to get to it because we spent such a great time with Sheriff Allard. But there's a piece that's saying, why is Donald Trump a coward for not debating his rivals? He has to debate his rivals. Well, you never see that same type of article about Joe Biden. Should he not debate his rivals? He has at least two, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., of course, and author Marianne Williamson, who you may remember from the last go-round. She was in the primaries before. So why is there, going back to our first segment, why is there a different set of rules for one candidate and not the other? And I know Chris Christie was calling out the former president as well for not debating, but maybe we'll get to that later on. But to have this piece that Biden holds a commanding lead in the New Hampshire Democratic primary, is anybody surprised by that? He has 78% support among likely Democrat primary voters. Now, keep in mind, this is a CNN poll, so take it with a grain of salt. Robert F. Kennedy is at 9%, so and this is just New Hampshire, so he has seen a little bit of a fall. He was at 20% nationwide, so I don't know what he was originally set at in New Hampshire, and 6% for Marianne Williamson. Biden's support has grown since the July poll that found 70% of likely Democrat primary voters support him. So my theory on this piece is that it's supposed to, after, almost a full month of negative coverage on the president, not super negative from the media, but just enough. Should he step down? How's his age affecting his presidency and his chances? But they had to rein it in a little bit because it's up to him whether or not he runs for re-election. So they can't have all this negative coverage, and then he decides to continue the campaign, and then what do? Then they have egg all over their face. So I think this is just them, meaning the media, coming back in and saying, no, look how strong he is. He's surged even since July. People have no worries anymore. Few likely Democrat primary voters see plausible alternatives to a Biden-led ticket. Ooh, that's interesting. A Biden-led ticket. So not saying Biden-Harris. Again, there's a lot of questions about that too. So many people lacking confidence, like Nancy Pelosi and Harris. I mean, if you read between the lines, was it Raskin? I keep forgetting who said it, but said, well, if Biden chooses Harris, she's the right person. Well, when did it become if? It seems like that would be, commonplace that they would both run on the same ticket. But that's how CNN words it. Maybe they're thinking we could get somebody else in there, maybe more likable, and Biden's poll numbers would grow nationwide, because most polls have nationwide Trump and Biden neck and neck. And that scares what out of the Democratic Party. So few likely Democrat primary voters see plausible alternatives to a Biden-led ticket. Just 9% hold a favorable view of Williamson, with 47% viewing her unfavorably. I wonder why that is. I if I'm being honest, in the last election, I kind of enjoyed her being a part of it. I'm not saying I would ever vote for her or anything like that, but I did enjoy her being a part of it. It was something completely different than politics as usual. But I'll continue. I'm going on a tangent here, and we're running late. Kennedy gets an identical 9% favorability rating, but with a 73% majority rating him unfavorably. Well, and you can't blame people rating him unfavorably after nothing but negative coverage. The media had really been attacking Kennedy since the moment he entered the race. Just 37% said there's someone else beside the current candidates they'd like to see run in the Democrat Party. But there's little agreement on who. 7% of all likely Democrat primary voters name Bernie Sanders, with smaller numbers suggesting Pete Buttigieg, remember him, 5%. California Governor Gavin Newsom at just 4%, and Elizabeth Warren at 3%. So there you go. Biden holds commanding lead in the New Hampshire primary. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Thank you for joining us here on Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. I want to talk about the migrant crisis for just a moment. Migrant encounters, wording always changes on this, so bear with us, but migrant encounters at the U.S.-Mexico border are on pace to reach a record high in September. U.S. border authorities, and as a matter of fact, before I get into this, we're going to have the overall number since Biden, estimated overall number since Biden took over. But U.S. border authorities encountered more than 142,000 migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border in the first half of September. And, obviously a lot has been said about the crisis in the city, and has it reached our area? That I don't have an answer for. But I will say in New York City, even Governor Hochul is saying not everybody can come here any longer. Which is not a position she's taken until recently, so it's getting bad. But I'll continue. The number of migrants caught crossing illegally or presenting themselves at legal border crossings has steadily risen after dropping in mid-May when the U.S. rolled out stricter new asylum rules. Well, in Eagle Pass, the mayor, Rolando Salinas, was on CNN's Out Front, and he was asked about how bad, essentially, the open borders are. Host Aaron Burnett even said, when you say there are no consequences, because he said there isn't if you cross illegally. You say there are no consequences, and that is causing more of this, meaning more of this surge. Does the president bear some of the responsibility for the crisis in your city? Salinas said, I'll be honest with you. I believe 100% he does bear some responsibility for this crisis. Please, he begs now, please just enforce the laws that are on the books. We are a nation of laws. That's all I ask for, is that it shouldn't be like this. We should be able to enforce laws. If you want to come here, good, come legally. A lot of people have in the past. It takes a lot of money and years to do it the right way. And it's not fair for those people that now you have thousands of people coming in without one single consequence. It's just not fair. So thousands crossing the border without any consequence. So just begging the president, just enforce the laws. Many have said, and I had comments about this, I believe, last week, that this is all orchestrated, is probably the wrong word, but this is all by design. The president really almost campaigned on the fact that he wanted open borders. They don't say open borders or open porous borders. They don't say it, but that's essentially what they want. So this is the number I wanted to bring up before we go to another break. Coming from the New York Post, the overall number, here we go. 3.8 million migrants have entered the United States since Biden took office. And this is it always looks weird saying this. 1.5 million sneaked in and are still here. But I guess it's not snuck either, right? I don't know. Neither sounds right. A jaw-dropping 3.8 million people have entered the United States through its borders since President Joe Biden took office in 2021, nearly half of whom slipped into the country illegally and were never caught. That's a scary number. They're all scary, but that's a scary number, because we had recently the article where there's concerns, and some have been caught, where people crossed the border that were on domestic terrorist watch lists. And you think of it from that aspect too, not just as we've heard from the past, the gangs and things like that. Over the last 3 years, 2,345,600 people have been granted notices to appear before an immigration court. That's according to figures compiled by Syracuse University. Those numbers are far from the full picture of people entering the country, though, the 1.23 million. Over the past 3 years, more than 1.5 million so-called gotaways, that's what they're called, gotaways, those who Customs and Border Protection estimate have made it across the border into the country with being detected or caught. And those numbers have also steadily been increasing year by year. So the gotaways are people that never checked in, quote unquote, checked in, 1.5, and that's just an estimate, 1.5 million. So how accurate is that number? That's a very good question. The number of cases has completely overwhelmed the court system, leading to a nearly 2.7 million backlog in immigration court cases still pending. After crossing the border, the migrants have been dispersed across all 50 states, but in the past year, 4 states have borne the brunt of the crisis: Texas, California, Florida, and here we go, New York, with 145,690. We're going to tell you what the White House had to say about, not necessarily that number specifically, but about the crisis at the border. They've been ignoring it as much as possible, but I think now with people like Hochul even speaking out a little bit, not speaking out, but saying you can't come here anymore, I think they're starting to see real trouble, signs of trouble when it comes to next year's elections. So we're going to talk about what the White House had to say when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. This is Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thank you so much for joining us. You see the number on the bottom of the screen. Thank you, by the way, for the virtual wave. But you can contact me on any of these issues. So we're talking about the migrant crisis. White House press secretary receiving a little bit of criticism over this, according to the New York Post anyway, that Karine Jean-Pierre insisted yesterday that President Biden is doing, and I quote, everything he can to combat the surge of migrants at the southern border. And then, I guess it's typical, so I won't, she blames Republicans for not doing enough. We have taken steps without the help of Republicans in Congress to do everything that we can to deal with this issue. And let's not forget what the Republicans proposed. Their continuing resolution led to 800 Custom and Border Protection agencies and officers being fired. Jean-Pierre then criticized the GOP's decision to block a procedural vote on a defense spending bill, and that we may get to that later on. There's quite a bit of infighting going on in the Republican Party. But anyway, when asked about a shocking report that 10,000 migrants crossed the southern border on Wednesday alone, Jean-Pierre refused to answer and then attempted to blame Republicans. So it was Fox News, Peter Doocy, said, "So what do you call it here at the White House when 10,000 people illegally cross the border in a single day?" So Jean-Pierre starts with, "So what do you call it, Peter, when the GOP puts forth and Doocy interrupted in a way. He said, "You're answering my question with a question." She said, "Okay, we're going to move on," shutting the reporter down. And this has been typical of this administration, not liking any type of tough question. And sometimes not even tough, just not softball questions. Gets very testy, whether it's at a press conference like this or with the president himself. Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas, said finally, KJP is correct, saying it, of course, sarcastically. Biden has taken historic action. He screwed up the entire immigration process by ignoring the law and common sense and single-handedly made a complete mess of our borders. Don't forget the border czar, Kamala Harris, and her historic action. So there you are. That's a quick update. Now, some GOP governors, how many in total? 25 GOP governors are demanding that Biden disclose where DHS is resettling illegal aliens. And I know that we've had people ask this program, ask me and some of our guests, are there migrants being shipped to our area? As far as anybody is aware, no. But that seems to be a problem just throughout the country as well. The GOP governors are saying, where are you resettling these illegal migrants? In a letter to Biden, Montana Governor Greg Gianforte, I hope I'm saying that right, along with 24 other Republican governors, are urging Biden to divulge the location of the millions of illegal aliens that have entered American communities since he took office in 2021. If I had to guess, there's probably not really an answer, or they don't have the statistics. But since you have taken office, there have been over 5.8 million illegal crossings at the southern border, says the letter. Even illegal crossings at the northern border have increased exponentially under your administration, in some areas by nearly 850%. In the past 2 years, 244 people on the terrorist watch list were stopped trying to cross the southern border, an all-time record. I'm glad they mentioned that. I couldn't think of the number before. We had it. We mentioned it on the program. 244 people on the terrorist watch list were stopped. Those were the ones stopped. It's kind of terrifying to think who wasn't stopped. Absent transparency from your administration, though, we cannot know how many terrorists have evaded capture and are now freely moving around the country. Your administration admitted under oath to Congress that cartels prioritize the southern border as a major corridor and exploit it daily for human and narcotics trafficking. Our country cannot tolerate 100,000 deaths every year from a fentanyl crisis fueled by cartels pouring the fatal drug into our communities. Nor can it tolerate the horrors of human trafficking and the lifelong scars it leaves on victims. Again, this is a letter from 25 Republican governors to the Biden administration. Though we remain committed to addressing these issues, states cannot afford to respond to a challenge of such magnitude while the federal government continues to turn a blind eye. Analysts estimate the annual net cost of illegal immigration for the United States at the federal, state, and local levels is at least $150.7 billion. States are forced to provide financial, educational, and medical support to migrants entering our country illegally. Support that is skyrocketing in cost due to record inflation and the unprecedented influx of migrants into our states. The financial impact on the states is staggering, and it is our hardworking citizens who shoulder that burden. Now, what will become of this letter? I think you probably know the answer, but I still wanted to kind of wrap that topic up in a bow with what I thought was a very succinct letter from those Republican governors. Okay, we do have to take another short break. We have a few things here about Biden making some slips. It depends on what news outlet you go to, gaffes, however they want to say it, that have raised some pretty major concerns. We also have a few things here about former President Trump. Do I want to bring up this story? There's one story that really doesn't mean a lot in the scheme of life. Yeah, no, I probably won't bring it up. Let me take a break. I'll think about it. We've got a bunch of announcements, too, coming up about what you can do this weekend. A lot of fun events. I mentioned Farm Trail Days earlier. We got a few others. One today. That's, of course, Corning Building Company's 175th anniversary celebration. I'll tell you more about that when we come back. So stay with us. This is, Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Today is the celebration of the 175th anniversary of the Corning Building Company. You can join them, go to their location, from 11:30 to 1:30, and lunch is on them. They're going to have a cookout, and there's going to be a lot of giveaways, prizes, things to enter to win. It's going to be a fun celebration. 175 years. We talked to Matt Smith about it just the other day on the program, and they're going to have a lot of fun today, so I hope that everybody can make it out. Okay, let's get back to some of the topics of the day. As always, I'm going to put that back up. You can contact me if you would like to weigh in on these topics or anything, as a matter of fact. So Biden, and this came up yesterday. I started seeing it kind of early in the day. They're saying that the president showed his age at a campaign a reception in Manhattan. So it actually happened on Wednesday. It started being reported on early yesterday. He repeated statements about the 2017 Charlottesville riot and his decision to run for president in 2020, minutes apart and nearly word for word. So he tells the story, says something else quickly in a couple minutes, and then repeats the same story nearly word for word. Now, I'm not going to read the story to you. I'm not going to repeat exactly what he said. You've heard him tell this story. It's very much very akin to what they're doing now, where a vote for Biden is a vote for democracy, to save democracy. When he campaigned back in 2020, it was, I did this because of Charlottesville. I ran because that put me over the edge. So almost a muscle memory thing, but to repeat it twice has raised major concerns. 77% of Americans, as you know from that poll, feel that Biden is too old to effectively govern if he wins a second term in office. And again, I know I keep mentioning this, but it's interesting to think that it's not just giving him 4 more years, it's 5 years, because you've got next year of campaigning. So it would keep him in a very, and it was right, Van Jones who said it, a very stressful job, giving this man a very stressful job for another 5 years. Now, as of now, and the New York Post is saying this, we've said it on the program numerous times as well, the president has given no outward indication that he plans on calling off his 2024 run. And again, I know former Congressman Joe Semplinsky was the one that brought it up on this program, but there really is no mechanism. If he wants to run, he can run. He's the incumbent. He's the president. So they can't say, you're not running. So it's really his decision to make, and obviously we haven't heard anything that would suggest that he's not running for re-election. So some commented on this word for word, within minutes, the same story. Then this coming from Fox News. National Review contributor Pradeep Shankar said, but we aren't supposed to care about his age and mental state. Okie dokie. RNC spokesperson Jake Schneider sarcastically said, this is completely fine. But the one I bring up is Austin area attorney Adam Lowy said it would be elder abuse if he runs again. And that's the headline from Fox News. Biden repeats same story twice, almost word for word, within minutes, sparking concern online, being called elder abuse. And, you know, we're not making light of this. I hope that that's not what you think. It is one of those things that you look at and there's concern. There's many people have even said, myself included, that you almost get angry that the people behind the scenes, his handlers, his family, allow him to go out there so frequently. And not even that frequently. I mean, you look at his campaign, the cliche, but it's true that he campaigned from his basement. But the speech after speech, meetings with dignitaries, it just, some have said it's not what it once was. Maybe that's the way to put it. So we don't say this lightly. It's just a major concern. He was at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus yesterday. So he expressed his admiration for the, quote, Congressional Black Caucus during a speech to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. The gaffe came as he delivered a speech in Washington. He said, "I know Sister Norma lives the lessons nuns taught me growing up. Lessons based on the Gospel of Matthew. Feed the hungry, care for the sick, welcome strangers. They echo what my dad taught me, and I mean this sincerely. My dad used to say, everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity and respect. The Congressional Black Caucus embodies all those values," and he did not stop to correct himself. Biden's latest verbal mistake comes a week after he was ripped for inferring, and I don't even think we had a chance to talk about this on the program, that African Americans and Hispanic workers don't have high school diplomas. He said at the time, quote, "We've seen record lows in unemployment, particularly, and I focused on this my whole career, particularly for African Americans and Hispanic workers and veterans. You know, the workers without high school diplomas." And you can always do the mind game of what would have happened if this were a Republican president. We all think those types of things, but it doesn't matter because the media is never going to be fair in its coverage at that level. Biden boasted Thursday about the number of Hispanic members in his cabinet and took credit for record low Latino unemployment and other economic gains in the Hispanic community under his watch. He also accused Republicans of gutting the immigration system during former President Donald Trump's time in office and continuing to undermine our border security today, blocking bipartisan reform. Now, this is interesting. I did not know this. This is coming from a Pew Research poll, but it was back in June. Nearly 2/3 of Hispanic voters, 60%, disapprove of Biden's job performance as president. Interesting. All right, I know. We're covering a lot this morning. That tends to be the case on Fridays. I'm rushing through a lot of topics, but again, you can weigh in on them. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. I do have to take another short break. One other thing about Biden, then we're going to talk a little bit about Trump, maybe about the potential government shutdown. Congress did return home after yesterday for, I believe, a week. I read this morning. The deadline before government shutdown is October 1st. So it's going to be interesting, and the media is having a field day with it, going after McCarthy, but also going after the Matt Gaetz and the Marjorie Taylor Greens. So the media always really hypes up government shutdowns. That's why it seems like we're having them or close, always on the brink of having one all the time. So we'll talk a little bit about that if we get a chance, but we have so much to cover. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Before we get back into various topics, I wanted to mention this. I know there's Farm Trail Days tomorrow. There's also this event that I mentioned earlier in the week, Strong Kids, Safe Kids, tomorrow at the Steuben County Fairgrounds from noon till 3. The festival will bring back popular carnival games, inflatable bouncers, and art activities tailored for children from birth to 6th grade, as well as information on health and safety issues from more than 25 family-related agencies. Activities include passport to fitness activities, a climbing wall, and giant blocks. Healthy snacks will be available, and the popular and free kids farmers market will be open. A car seat safety check will also be conducted by the New York State Police. So again, that's tomorrow, noon till 3. Just wanted to pass that along to you. Okay, 2 more IRS officials say that David Wise stymied and not the deciding person on the Hunter Biden tax crimes. 2 more IRS officials have come forward and detailed how now special counsel David Wise was not the deciding person over whether to charge President Biden's son Hunter with tax crimes, contrary to sworn testimony from Attorney General Merrick Garland. We didn't have a chance to talk about that hearing with Garland. Got pretty testy. IRS Director of Field Operations Michael Batdorf and DC IRS special agent in charge, Darrell Walden, detailed how Wise probe was thwarted in recent testimony before the House Ways and Means Committee. Garland has repeatedly insisted to lawmakers, most recently on Wednesday, before the House Judiciary Committee, that Wise, the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, had, quote, full authority to bring cases against Hunter Biden anywhere he wished, and that Garland would not personally interfere in that probe. However, Batdorf told lawmakers during September 12th transcribed interview that the Justice Department's tax division would have also had to sign off on any charges that Wise wanted to pursue. Quote, my understanding would be that DOJ tax has to authorize it first. This is someone that's been working with the IRS for 22 years. So, my understanding is that, he can't make that charging decision without DOJ tax authorization. This all gets a little wonky, but it was an update that you're not hearing very many places. I got that from the New York Post, but I did not see that covered elsewhere, so I wanted to pass it along to you. How are we doing on time? We're doing good. Okay. Let's talk about the Republican side of things, the primary. Really, the media continues to push Nikki Haley. It seems like article after article. She is, in some states, second now, but obviously it's a distant second. Nikki Haley is now ramping up criticism. This coming out of the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. Ramping up criticism of former President Trump. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to take a break, and we'll talk about what she had to say a little bit, maybe about Chris Christie. A lot to cover. Man. And it's going fast. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Received a comment, a couple of virtual waves, thank you. But I also received comment, I would like to see a reality show about managing a fast food restaurant or delivering packages and put Biden and Trump competing. Who do you think would win? I'll raise that question to you, the viewer. Who do you think would win? So as I mentioned, Nikki Haley is ramping up criticism. I guess she believes that maybe this is the avenue to go down. She is moving up in the polls, but still a distant second and sometimes third, depending on the state. She was in New Hampshire. It actually shows her in a definitive second in New Hampshire, according to the Daily Mail, receiving 14% of the votes compared to Trump's 42%. So someone asked, what do you think people will, or how will people perceive Trump 100 years from now? How will history reflect on President Trump? How do I think he will be remembered? She's quoted as saying, time does funny things. My thought will be that he was the right president at the right time. He broke things that needed to be broken. He listened and brought in a group of people who felt unheard, like where I grew up in rural South Carolina. Then it went downhill. He was thin-skinned and easily distracted. He didn't do anything on fiscal policy and really spent a lot of money, and we're all paying the price for it. That's been a pretty constant talking point for her about the money. That was one of the reasons why I think the media started to praise her, if you will, or say that she could really do this, because she did have that dig at spending under Trump during the debate. He used to be good on foreign policy, and now he has started to walk it back and get weak in the knees when it comes to Ukraine. Now, Chris Christie, who Nikki Haley's somewhat new to that criticism game, because it's tough for her. When you think about it, she worked for him, worked in his administration. But Chris Christie, who just does whatever is politically expedient, he saw an opportunity as being the attack Trump guy, right? And he's continuing to do so. He doesn't like when people stand up to him, this is Chris Christie, and calling him out on the nonsense that he's involved in. And I guess he had a bad night last night, maybe ate some bad Chinese food or something. Well, 11:30 at night, a little indigestion decided to attack me. So apparently he was tweeting or using his Truth Social to go after Chris Christie. That's Donald Trump did. Keep it coming, Donald. And by the way, if he had any guts, he'd get on the debate stage. That's why the media is saying this. Chris Christie's been saying this. They're thinking that they could goad the former president into joining the debate because he doesn't like criticism. And he's got things to say about me. Stop hiding behind your social media site, your failed social media site, Donald. and start taking me on directly. Show up. Stop being a coward. So Chris Christie still trying to find his niche as the attack dog. I think it comes off flat or kind of overdone. But obviously there's some in the media, some on the left that love it. One last break. Then we're going to wrap things up. Wow, this is going quick. On Frankly Speaking. Right here on Big Fox. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This has been a lot of fun. I know we covered a lot. I thank you to everybody reaching out with their comments. This is coming from the Daily Beast, so it's a very liberal perspective, but there's a few points to take away from it that aren't incorrect necessarily. With a government shutdown just 9 days away, so this would actually be 8 days away now, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy was left with egg on his face again on Thursday as he has conceded that far-right saboteurs in his own party were hell-bent on burning the place down. Boy, it seems I don't think this is personally good, this infighting for the Republican Party, and many people criticizing the Matt Gaetz and the like, and that group for really causing future issues for the party. But after a nightmare week by being steamrolled by conservative hardliners and subsequently slammed by fed-up moderates, Kevin McCarthy suffered another humiliating defeat when a vote to bring a defense spending bill to the floor failed on Thursday morning, forcing him to send House members home for this week without a government funding deal in sight. And that is interesting when you can't get a defense spending bill. And I'm not criticizing McCarthy at all in this scenario. I think he's in a very bad place. What I don't like is the media loves coverage of government shutdown and loves blaming Republicans. And it looks as if they will have plenty of opportunity for that. Funding the Pentagon is usually one of the easiest things for House Republicans to pass. And the vote was, according to Politico, supposed to show that the party has a path to possibly passing a wider spending bill that would avert a government shutdown on October 1st. That fell apart. Many Republicans even expressing their anger with that. I don't know. They call them conservative. But I'm not sure what to consider Gaetz, and many are being critical of giving more funding to Ukraine. So I'm not sure what you would want to call that group, but many critical of them and what this will ultimately do for the Republicans. But that's enough of that topic, because you'll hear that everywhere in the upcoming week. Trust me, that'll be the main coverage. But that is it for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Isn't that unbelievable how fast it went? Thank you to everybody who reached out. I hope that everybody has a fun, safe weekend and make it out today. The Corning Building Company, as they are celebrating 175 years in business. It's from 11:30 till 1:30 at the Corning Building location, and you can have lunch on them, and there's going to be prizes and giveaways, so I hope everybody can make it out. And there's Farm Trail Days, and there's the Kids Safety event at the Steuben County Fair, so there's a lot going on. So I hope that you have a fun, safe weekend, and you join us starting at 7 a.m. on Monday for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV Big Fox. I know that I'm looking forward to it already, and we're going to have plenty to talk about next week, and we're going to have a lot of great guests. So you should just tune in. I'm going to keep them a surprise because I'm still working on a few, still setting a few in stone. So just tune in. You won't regret it. All right, enough. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday morning with Frankly Speaking.